Hi, I'm Jennifer Ackerman-Haywood from CraftSanity.com, and today I'm going to show you how to weave a placemat on the CraftSanity Placement Loom. You can weave with a variety of materials. You can weave with my favorite, recycled bed linens. This is a really fun one. You can do stripes and plaids with cotton fabric that you tear into strips, and I have another video on my channel that you can see on how to prepare the fabric for weaving. You can also weave with chunky yarns, and this is a chunky chenille from just any craft store. You can buy that. That's the advantage, is if you work with something like this. You can also use cotton, several strands of cotton yarn held together. If you're working with yarn, you don't have to prepare it yourself, and that is a plus. You can just start weaving. Today I'm going to use some fabric that is already prepared. It's been torn into strips, rolled into a ball, and we're good to go. Okay, so I'm going to tie my fabric on to get started with the warping, and I always tend to go up to the top left. And this is just a loose knot, nothing that's gonna, I want to be able to take that out. Okay, and I'm gonna hold my fabric like a loop, basically. I'm gonna go around, not gonna worry about all these, any strings that are hanging off. And I'm just gonna go across. Now notice that my tension is fairly loose. You want to be able to move this, and it shouldn't be fighting you. It should be pretty loose. Because if it's super tight, especially with fabric doesn't have a lot of stretch to it. And so if you make it too tight, it's going to be a battle to weave, and that's not fun. So you want your weaving to be tight enough that the weave is, you know, it has a nice woven structure when you're done, but you don't want it to be so incredibly tight that weaving it is a terrible experience. And what you can do is put your weaving material down below in a box or basket, and that will help it kind of stay put a little bit better instead of rolling around a table. And notice I'm not trying to position the fabric any particular way. Sometimes the front of the fabric is facing up, and sometimes the back is. It kind of gets twisted around. I don't worry about that. Some people will fold it very carefully so it's like that the whole way. I don't do that. I don't know. It seems a little too time consuming for me, but you definitely can do that if you want to get a particular finished product. And I'm warping the loom in this direction because I want to weave less across. So when I go back and weave the long way, I'm going to have less passes through than if I was to go weave the short distance across the loom. So now this is it is definitely slower. Weaving with warping the loom with fabric is a little bit slower. It's also a little more challenging to set up your first row because it kind of all blends together here. So if you want to do your first project with yarn, that might not be a bad idea. And you can check out my hat weaving video if you want to see me weaving on a loom that's very similar to this. The hat loom is similar. This is just not adjustable at all, and it's a different size. But when I weave with the hat loom, on those videos I'm using yarn, so you can kind of see how how the setup goes with yarn. It's basically the same. It's just a slightly different process. Okay, so once you get down to the last peg, you are going to come up, go around that last peg. Try not to weave your hair into the placemat, my word. Okay, so you go around this last peg, and then you're going to turn your loom this way, and you're going to loop back around this first peg, and you're going to go all the way across here. And notice I'm not weaving anything. I'm just going across I'm gonna leave this, so I'm going over that first one, and I'm gonna come over here, and I'm gonna go over. So this is under, over, every other one. I'm going to pop the loop off and put it over that strand I have going across. Now it is tricky to see when you're doing this first row. The reason I do it this way is it's easier to check your mistakes, to see if you have any mistakes. You don't want to check your mistakes. You don't want mistakes. You want to check for mistakes. And so I'm reaching in, and as you can see, I'm just pulling that whole loop up and over. Now, if you try to, you can also just weave under over if you wanted to, but you run the risk of making a mistake. And I've made so many mistakes that I've decided that this is the easiest way to avoid having to redo that first row. So again, I'm just grabbing what's on the peg, and this is the same technique I use for pot holder weaving, blanket weaving, scarf weaving, everything. I do it all the same way. And I like to weave as if it's this pot holder technique where you're weaving, it's like this is a looper coming through here because I'm using this loop that's going around. So I'm weaving basically a double strand at a time here. And so you're just skipping every other peg, removing the loop, and putting it over. And after you get a couple rows established, your first 2 rows, you're usually good to go. So hang in there. Every time I do these videos, I think, geez, I really should get a manicure, but I never get manicures, so it wouldn't make sense to get one for a video. And I have like ink on my fingernails because I'm a printmaker as well. So, all right, so I go over here. We're almost to the end of the row. Just be glad you're not doing a blanket right now. It could take even longer. Okay. Let me get down to the last one. All right. So it still doesn't look like much. You can't even see that first row. So you're like, wow, this is definitely not a very good weaving video. Well, trust me, it's going to get better here. Okay, so before we go any further, I'm going to put a dowel in, and this is going to be the opposite of what I just did. Okay, and the reason why I'm doing this is so every other row, I'm not going to have to work very hard. I'm just going to follow the dowel with my fabric, and so I'm just reaching, and everything that was doing the opposite of the previous row. So if it was under, it's going to be over now. And you can do other more complex weaving patterns. I'm just showing a basic plain weave right now. And again, my tension is not super tight. It's got some give to it. And this will get tighter the more weaving I do. But and it's good to take your time on these first 2 rows, because if you this is where the mistakes are often made. And if I set it up wrong with the dowel and I don't pull the right strands up, then I'm going to basically make the same exact mistake in every row. And it would have been good for me to have a little bit longer dowel, but we're gonna roll with this. That was my mistake. I got one for the other direction, but it still will help me out here. So what I'm going to do is pick up the fabric right along that dowel. Go right across, and you can't really see very well because, like I said, we're just establishing this. It'll get easier to see as we go. I'm just picking up the fabric right along here, so I'm not really thinking about what I'm weaving. I'm going up to this next peg. And here's what I have. So it's kind of arced here, and I like to push the fabric back in the center and then comb up with my fingers on the sides. Now the reason why I do that is because you don't want it to be super tight, and this just helps it remain fairly loose. Okay. All right, so now we're ready. I think I'm gonna put a couple mats down here, so it's not as loud. Actually, you know, I'm gonna switch to the easel now. I'm gonna switch over to the easel and we'll keep going here. Okay, so I switched out the dowel that was too short for a shed stick that is longer, so we should be able to be good to go here. So on the third row, I have to go in and pick up the fabric, and I'm going around here, and I'm gonna hold my fabric as a loop throughout the whole weaving process. And I usually pull up about 3 groupings of yarn as I go. Okay, so I'm done with that third row. I'm gonna just push the center up first and then pull the fabric up. Again, I'm not making this super tight. And now on this fourth pass, I can come down here by the shed stick and just pull it through. I'm always holding my fabric like a loop here, as if I'm weaving with a giant looper on a potholder loom. Okay, so I just flipped the loom. So I was weaving from this direction, and now I'm going to weave from this direction. And what I like to do is when I get a little ways through the weaving, I like to flip it so I'm pushing my woven fabric down, and it just makes it a little bit easier. But again, this is a personal preference. By all means, do what you're comfortable with. Okay, I filled up the loom with fabric, and now I'm ready to remove the placemat from the loom. I want to point out a couple of things. When you weave with fabric, it's pretty thick, so sometimes you're going to want to skip some pegs along the way. So if it looks like it's getting too tight, like I skipped a row here, I skipped another row here. And if I was using yarn, I'd probably go back through another time. I'd go around this peg and go back across here and end over here. But because this is pretty packed, I still have, the tension is good, but I don't want to, it just gets too hard to weave. So when you get to the point where you've filled the loom up, even if there are more pegs left, don't worry about that. Just go ahead and finish it and take it off. Now, when you're weaving with a material like this chunky chenille here, that is a much looser weave. You can actually, you know, poke your finger through it. You're going to use all the pegs on the loom. So just know that you have the option of finishing without filling up all the pegs when you're working with fabric. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is cut that fabric, and I'm going to take a crochet hook now, and I am going to, you can pretty much start anywhere, but usually when I have an end, I like to start, so I'm going to come back and loop this end through my last loop. So probably what I will do is turn my loom around, and I'm going to start right here. And I'm just taking one loop off, and then I'm taking the next loop and putting it through, like so. And the tension will loosen as you move around the loom. So this first part, it's the tightest. You just continue to pull. When I weave with yarn, sometimes I'll use my fingers to do this part, but when you're working with fabric, this cotton fabric that doesn't have the stretch to it, you're definitely going to want to use a crochet hook. I weave primarily with my fingers, but sometimes people find that using a crochet hook, especially as you get near the end, that goes easier for them. So it comes down to preference. Okay, now we're at the corner where we started, where we knotted things on. So you can use your crochet hook to undo this. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is with this extra piece here, this end, I'm just gonna pull up a loop, like I'm crocheting, pull it through, and pull the next one through. And I'm gonna just continue to remove this from the loom. And I'm gonna leave this tail here and weave it in when I come back. But I've caught it up in this bind off, so it's not going anywhere. Okay, so I have finished the placemat and woven in the ends, and I put it back here so you can see how much it pulls in. So it pulls in about, looks like each end pulled in about 1 inch, and then on the wider sides, or the narrower sides, it pulled in about 1.5 inches, it looks like, on each side. So just to compare, when you weave with the yarn, it pulls in a little bit more. So to compare these two, the yarn is gonna pull in a little bit more. So just yeah, Yeah, just so you know that it's going to be a little bit different with depending on the material that you weave with, but the yarn also weaves up faster than the fabric. The fabric is a little bit more challenging to work with, but the yarn is easier on your hands and a lot faster. So you can decide what you want to do, what approach you want to take. But I hope this video has been helpful and you have some fun weaving placemats. Happy weaving!